Hello and welcome back to CSS3 Animations. In our last video, we talked about how to create an automatic animation that runs as soon as the page loads, and we have these clouds moving smoothly across the sky and they are looping seamlessly. Well, in this video, we're going to animate the plane as well, but this animation is going to be a little more complex. We want the plane to animate across the screen, but as it animates across, I also want it to slowly kind of move up and down a little bit to give it a little bit of a sense that it's actually a plane flying in the air instead of just being glued in the same spot. So as it moves across, it's also going to move up and down a little bit, and we're going to do that by adding extra keyframes to the animation for that plane. So let's talk about how to do that. We're going to start, first of all, by just creating an animation of the plane flying all the way across and then looping back around to the beginning. And you can probably figure out how to do this particular animation by yourself. In fact, I want to encourage you to do that. Pause your video right now and try to create that animation of the plane moving from the left side of the stage all the way across until it disappears off the edge to the right. And then once it completely disappears, have it loop back to the beginning over and over again. So go ahead and try to do that on your own. And then once you're done, unpause the video and then we can take it from there. So go ahead and pause the video and come right back when you're done. Okay, I hope you figured out how to do this yourself, how to move this plane at least from left to right. If not, then I'm going to go ahead and explain how to do that here, and then we'll add extra keyframes. So let's jump back into our CSS file, and I'm working in the lesson 12 folder, but all the files that we have here are the same files we ended with in lesson 11. So if you're following along, then start with the saved files in lesson 11, and then I'm going to save everything we do in this video in the lesson 12 folder. So in the lesson 12 folder, we have our CSS3 animation.css file. And if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we have this banner section where we've already created one animation here for the sky. Now we're going to create another animation for the plane. Now remember, we gave the plane a class of over. So down here below everything that we've already done, I'm going to skip a couple lines and get started on our animation for the over class. So we're looking inside the div with a class of banner for an image with a class of over. So let's create our animation. We're going to start our left value. Now by default, our left value is set at 0. So we can see the plane on the screen with the top left value of 0 and 0. Well, when our animation starts, I don't want it to be at 0. I want the plane to be completely off the left end of the stage. And since this particular banner is 960 pixels wide, I'm just going to set the left position to negative 960 pixels. So that'll be its starting position. So if we save that and jump back into our browser here and jump to lesson 12 here instead of lesson 11, you'll see that our clouds are still animating, but our plane is gone. And that's because we've moved our plane completely off the left edge of the banner. So now we're going to animate that plane all the way across, and we're not going to bring it back to 0, because if we bring it back to 0, then the plane will stop right in the center of the banner. We actually want it to move all the way off the edge. So we're going to move it to a positive 960 pixels. So let's jump back into our file and create that animation. So first of all, we're going to create the WebKit animation duration property. And this one, I want it to last about 20 seconds. I want it to take a while for the plane to get all the way across so that we have time to read the banner and really notice that banner as it's flying across. So after we do that, we'll create a name for this animation. So WebKit animation -name, and I'm going to set this equal to plane. Okay, our next property is going to be our timing function. So WebKit animation timing, there we go, function. We're going to set that to linear as well. And then finally the iteration count, we want this to loop over and over again. So we're going to make it infinite. WebKit animation iteration count is infinite. Okay, so we've got that taken care of. Now we need to create, just like we did up here, our keyframes. So we'll go to the end, skip a couple lines, and create our keyframes rule. So @WebKit-keyframes space, and then the name that we gave to our animation up here. We gave it the name plane. So here we're going to type in the word plane, put our opening and closing curly brackets for that, and then we'll create our from and to. So for now, we're just going to animate it from left to right. So from, we're going to set our left property equal to -960 pixels. And then we'll put our closing curly bracket for the from section. Skip a couple lines and do to. And here we're going to set our left property to a +960 pixels. So we're going to move it all the way off the stage, all the way off the left side of the banner, and we're going to animate it across until it's all the way off the right side of the banner. And that should take 20 seconds to do. So let's see if that works. We'll save our file, go back into our browser and refresh. And sure enough, now we see the plane animating across. And as it animates across, we can start to read what's on the banner. And hopefully it will continue moving. And since we set the iteration to infinite, once it reaches the right edge of the stage, once it moves all the way off, we should see that animation loop around and we should see the plane appear again on the left side, and we do. So that's working fine. Now I want to create a little bit of variation in the flight of the plane. I want it to kind of move up and down a little bit to really get the sense that it's flying. So let's jump back into our code and do that. So the way we add more keyframes is we keep our from and our to keyframes right where they are, and then we just throw in some extra keyframes in between them. And we're going to do that using percentages. So for example, let's go ahead and set the top property here in the from state to 0 pixels. And then in the to state, I'm also going to set it to 0 pixels. So it's not really animating anywhere right now. It's going from 0 to 0, which is nothing. It's not moving at all as far as going up and down is concerned. But now we're going to create some keyframes in between that'll cause it to move up and down. And we just want it to start and end at 0. So after the closing curly bracket for the from section, I'm going to hit enter a couple of times. And let's say that halfway through the animation, we want it to move down about 25 pixels. So the way we do that is we type in a percentage here. So I'm going to type 50%. In other words, 50% of the way through the animation, we want it to have certain values. So we're going to construct this the same way we do with the from and to section with opening and closing curly brackets. And then inside those curly brackets, we can alter these positions. So I don't want to deal with the left position. I want it to stay a constant animation from left to right. So we're going to leave these alone, and we're not going to deal with the left position inside these keyframes. Instead, we're just going to deal with the top position. So halfway through the animation, let's move the top position to, let's say, 25 pixels. So let's save that, go back into our file and refresh. And now as it animates across, you can see that it's animating down a little bit as well. And once it gets halfway across, which is basically when the plane is in the very center, it starts moving back up again. So that's what I want to do, but I want it to move up and down a few times, maybe every 10% of the animation. So let's go back into our code and make that happen. So instead of doing this at 50%, I'm going to do it at 10%. And then I'm going to skip a couple lines after that 10%, and we'll create another rule at 20% where we set the top equal to a -25 pixels. So every 10% of the way through the animation, it's going to be moving up and down about 50 pixels at a time, or I guess exactly 50 pixels at a time. So I want this to happen several times, all the way up to 90%. So let's just highlight both of these, copy it, and we'll paste it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And then we need to change our percentages here. So this one will be 30, this one will be 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90. Now we have an extra one here, and you might think we would change this one to 100, but we're not, because this one down here in the to step, that one's going to be 100%. So we're just going to get rid of this 10th one here. And it looks like I didn't actually change these. Sorry, 80 and 90%. There we go. And then let's put a little bit more white space in between some of these. And that looks good. So make sure you have 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way up to 90. And then just double check to make sure that you're alternating between 25 and negative 25 pixels all the way through. So now every 10% of the way through the animation, the plane should be moving up and back down as it continues to move from left to right. So let's save that, jump back into our file, Command R to refresh the browser, and now let's take a look at that. So it moves up, it moves down, and it just keeps moving up and down as it flies across the stage. So obviously it's not as fancy as the kind of animations you'd be able to do by using a little bit more math, maybe in JavaScript or Flash, but it's a really cool animation, especially considering that we did all of this using only CSS, not a single line of JavaScript code in here. So it's a very, very powerful thing to be able to do. And one thing you want to make sure to do after you make sure it's working is to include all the other vendor prefixes. And for this particular animation, all we're really going to include is WebKit and Mozilla. And so what we need to do is up here, copy all of that, paste it, and we'll include the Mozilla prefixes here. And then we need to include it here as well. Oops, I don't want to change that one. We don't want to get rid of that WebKit one. We just want to copy it and paste it. So we'll copy that entire WebKit keyframes rule and then paste it just below and then change it to MOZ. And then we'll do the same thing down here. We'll take all of these, copy them, paste, and then change them all to Mozilla prefixes. And then for this last rule, we'll highlight all of that, copy it, skip a couple lines, paste it, and then at the top, we'll change this one to MOZ keyframes plane. So we'll save that, jump back over to Chrome and refresh the page just to make sure everything is still working fine, and it is. So again, that's how you create an animation in CSS that has multiple keyframes in it. Now, if you want, you can have this thing moving from left to right and top to bottom all over the place, and you would just follow the same rules. You would create different keyframes based on the percentage of the way through the animation you want something to happen, and that's how you would do it. So again, it's a very powerful tool to be able to do this in CSS. So that wraps it up for keyframed animations in CSS3. I hope you've learned a lot from it, and I hope you can find some creative ways to apply this to your own animations. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.